So in this video I'm going to show you how to make one of these, a growing ladder, and this is one of my very favourite growing structures because it's such a good way to fit more pots in the same amount of space. So instead of just having 2 pots here taking up a space, I now have 3 levels and have basically 3 times as many pots, and you get the added benefit of the height, which means you get more light, often more light higher up here, and also more interest. A container garden on different levels is more attractive, I think, to look at than one which is just flat on the ground. Now, you can buy these sometimes in the shops, but the benefit of making your own is, well, you can do them for cheaper, particularly if you can find the wood. The first one of these I made, I found some wood in a skip in London. But the other benefit is you can make them to whatever size you want, so you can make it to fit the pots that you've got in terms of width and in terms of height, and you can also make it to fit the space that you have. And not so much this one, because there's not much space behind here, but some of the bigger ones actually have quite useful storage space behind, which again in a small space is always very useful. So let me show you now how I made this ladder. So the first thing to do is to measure the pots you want to put on the ladder, so you can work out how wide the shelves want to be and how much space you want to leave in between the shelves. In general, it's a good idea to make the shelves just a little bit bigger than your pot, so you've got plenty of space to squeeze them on. You then need to go get some wood. You want something nice and strong. I use old reclaimed scaffold boards, and one thing I found that makes the job a lot easier is if you get the wood cut by someone professionally, and then you know that the shelves are going to be completely square, and that makes it much easier to fit together. The next job is to mark up the uprights so that you can cut them so they lean neatly against the wall. The easiest way to do this is to lean the bit of wood against the wall at the angle that you want, and then get another bit of wood, put it flat against the wall and make a mark. And that is the angle then that you need to cut. Once you've marked the angle, you can then move a line up or down if you want to. Then mark the line that you need to cut at the bottom in the same way, putting a bit of wood flat on the floor and marking along the top edge will give you the angle you want. And again, if you want to move that line further down, closer to the bottom, you can, but you're just getting the right angle in this way. Then you want to chop the wood. This is perhaps the most difficult bit, but once you've done this, the hardest bit is over. Once cut, lean it against the wall to check that the angles all work and it fits neatly and snugly. You can then use the first piece of wood you cut as a template to mark out the second piece, and that means you'll get 2 pieces of wood which should be pretty much the same. So then cut that one out and check that fits against the wall too. So once you've cut your bits of wood, you then might want to give them a bit of a sand and also a paint with some sort of external preservative to prolong the life. It's quite a lot of work making one of these, so it's more work to paint them, but it will last a lot longer if you paint it as well. And you know, you can make it look nice. Now that it's painted, you can start putting it together, and the first thing you need to do is mark where on the uprights you want the shelves to be. So to help me do that, I've put a pot underneath so I know what height it needs to be, and then I'm simply going to mark on the upright where the top of the shelf should be. I'm then using a tape measure to mark out where the second shelf should be. Obviously, if you've got 3 or 4 shelves, mark these up now as well. Once I've marked the height of the shelves, I need to draw a straight line on which to screw a batten to hold up the shelf. And to make sure that that line is completely horizontal and the shelf is completely flat, I'm using a spirit level to mark it out. I'm now going to cut some smaller bits of wood that I can screw on as battens to hold the shelves up, and in the battens drilling some pilot holes for screws so I can screw them on. And then we can see that the the piece of wood to hold the shelf up. We're going to screw the shelf on as well directly through here, but this will just hold it in place while we do that. So we're going to screw those on, screw that on there. Once you've put all the battens on, you can test how it all fits together. And if you've cut everything right, it should stand up fairly well at this point without any additional screws. But we'll just test it first. I've also had to cut a hole in the top shelf so it fits around the pipe. So luckily it all seems to fit together okay, so I'm just going to test it by putting a pot on it, double check, and that seems fine. So now we're ready to screw the whole thing together. So I'm putting these quite long screws to hold the shelves up, just to make sure they're as secure as possible, and these also ones that won't rust. To put these screws in, I'm drilling pilot holes into the uprights, and then I'll put 2 screws into each shelf. Once I've finished putting these screws in, I will give the whole ladder a little bit of a touch up, particularly that hole in the top shelf at the back I had to cut and where the battens are. I'll also paint underneath the legs again, because that's the bit which is going to be most in contact with water and is most likely to rot. The other thing you can do is put something underneath of the legs just to raise them up a little bit, like a tile or something like that, to keep them off the ground. One of the benefits of these ladders is that they don't actually need screwing onto the wall. The weight of the pot will hold them there, and that means that they are easy to move around. And also, if you're growing in rental accommodation or somewhere you just don't want to screw into the walls, you don't have to. And if you don't have a wall to lean them against, you can also add legs onto the back, and that's exactly what I have done in my current front yard, where I've repurposed 2 ladders that used to lean against the wall to stand in one corner and to give me a lot of extra growing space. So that's how to make a growing ladder. Not too difficult, but it's a little bit of work as well. But something, particularly if you can get bits of wood cut for you, that helps to make it a lot easier. And hopefully it's something that will give you many years of use. My last one lasted, I think, about 13 years before it finally rotted and I had to get a new one. So they're a great way for making more of a small space, keeping your pots organised and tidy, and for also giving you a bit more light often higher up, particularly in spaces which are not so sunny.